talking about. And for most of my adult life, I've been Courtney's mom and now Kinzel's grandma. So thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you to the members of HRABC and guests. And it's truly an honor for me to be here with you. I love this topic because I love to see the light bulbs go off. As a master black belt in Lean Six Sigma, I integrate everything that I do when it comes to building capacity, building maturity, raising your level of likeness when it comes to the job every day. So what we are going to talk tonight about is changing that paradigm when it comes to giving that message of performance improvement, when it comes to building the capacity of your organization from that most valuable asset, and it's giving the teams the feedback, but also getting it back in terms of helping you to become a better leader. And that's really what it's going to be all about tonight. So it's going to be reciprocal. I'm not someone who likes to stand and do the monologues. So if you're one who has no hesitation about interrupting, please feel free to do so. I want this to be a dialogue. And if I need to ask you to hold a moment, then I'll do that. We will have questions at the end. But please, let's make this a dialogue wherever you get that urge to jump in and join me in this conversation. Let's get started. This whole issue of performance and process improvement and evaluation is a tough one. It is probably the least liked activity in organizations. Preparing for this, we did some research, and we found that only 14% of organizations, and more specifically HR leaders and managers, found that their performance management systems were acceptable. 14%. Not a good ratio. Really kind of pitifully poor. But I wanted to set the tone and look at the definition that Ken Ravisa came up with, and that's peak performance in life isn't about succeeding all of the time or even being happy, but it helps. And it's often more about compensating, adjusting, and doing the best that you can when you have all of the right components right now. Can we agree on that one? Amen. Okay. What I'm going to share with you in our conversation this evening is I'm going to give you some tools for your toolbox. So let's see what I got for you. People, planet, and profits, the 3 Ps. So when we talk about performance management, performance improvement, reciprocal evaluations, we're talking about the 3 Ps. People, planet, and profits. We need the people to understand what the message is, what the objectives are, so that they can help cultivate and grow the planet, which is our company, and ultimately, the reason why we're here as leaders, as companies, as organizations, is the profits. It's the bottom line for why we all come to work, why we all look to grow. But when it comes to performance evaluations, as you can see on my screen, 45% of HR leaders do not think that annual performance evaluations are fruitful. 45%, that's almost half. In the pool that was included in the survey by Talent Management 360, 2,677 respondents revealed that 98% found review processes unnecessary. 645 HR managers said, forget about it, we're wasting our time. But I'm not preaching to the choir, am I? You all think this is just wonderful stuff, right? 232 CEOs said, we don't have a clue about it, we can care less about it, we just want the bottom line to keep growing. And 1,800, who are the others, or the people that are on the receiving end of this stuff, that's a technical term, said it's a waste of time. And then we looked at another group of folks, and 58% of the organization said the performance systems that they have, they gave them a C or below. Somebody paid too much for something, folks. Which is why we keep this young lady busy.
Actually, I can tell you another reason why you keep me busy is that the manager, and this is probably why the 45% figure, I can't tell you how many times I get called, oh, so-and-so, they're terrible.
Right.
Gotta get rid of them. Send me their performance reviews.
No paperwork. No paperwork. So let's see what we've got next. One of the things I like to do is I like to go on safaris. Haven't been on an actual one yet, but we seem to always be taking people on excursions when we do our trainings, when we do our coaching, when we do our consulting. So tonight, if you would indulge me, and I would like each and every one of you to think of yourself as a safari guide. Because when we do performance evaluations and appraisals and coaching, we are going on a safari. We never know what we're going to find. We never know what's going to pop out of the brush. But we do know that something will surface. So as we go on this safari, let's look at it being able to provide us with some information and vice versa. Let's look at the fact that as this tour that we are guiding is doing well in what we're asking them to do, keeping their hands inside the car, don't feed the animals, we're going to reward them, we're going to recognize them. We're going to become facilitators and coordinate. However, how many of you have ever been on a tour? And sometimes you would just want that tour guide to just hush for a minute. Let me enjoy the space. Let me enjoy the moment. So you're going to learn how to facilitate and coordinate so that they become empowered, so that you can turn them loose and they can walk off by themselves for half a minute. Not too far, but you let them go. We want to be able to encourage collaborative problem solving. One of the things that we need to do more of when we do these performance evaluations is make it collaborative. And we're going to put some tools in your toolbox tonight so that you can make it collaborative as opposed to a monologue. Being able to mediate and advocate. That's called the dark side. I call it the dark side because, again, you've got to be able to say and do the obvious in a scripted manner so that we don't have to talk to our attorney about why we did or didn't say something to resolve a conflict. We want to be able to resolve it, and we want the parties to own the solution. So I'm going to give you some tools tonight about that. But we want to be honest and sincere as we are building these communication factors called performance evaluation. We want to be sponges. So as you're giving information, you need to be prepared to give it back, or get it back rather. The fear factor. There is a fear factor when we're looking to develop change. There's a fear factor when we are giving and or receiving information, because again, we're on safari. We don't know what's going to pop out. We don't know what kind of mindset people are in these days, and you have to always be prepared to move people off of that fear factor. We're going to look to encourage, and then there's the perspective of never be satisfied. Your performance is reliant upon it. The employee's performance is reliant upon it. So never be satisfied and never be contented. Why? Because if we are, our profits won't grow. It's about the profits. But in most instances, when we are doing performance, make sure that you are a listener. Then communicate. And that's the most critical part. Because as you're giving effective feedback that guides and influences, it's going to give you credibility, not only as an HR professional, but as a general manager. Let's look at how that path goes as we're building the confidence in the realities of performance and process improvement. Now, most of us, when we see these kinds of diagrams, we look at the forming, storming, norming, right? We don't do that on the safari. On the safari, we look at anticipation. How many of you have had high anticipation when it comes to a performance improvement or a performance engagement or session coming up? Who is not full of anticipation? Do you have performance and process improvement sessions one-on-one teams in your organization? So everybody knows what to expect. No? You can talk to me. Okay. There is an anticipation stage of the unknown. Most people are like, okay, what surprises are going to spring on me now? As we share, as we move forward, there could potentially be disappointment. You, as a coach, as a safari guide, have got to be able to bring people out of that disappointment. Well, you said we see animals. We've been on this safari for 10 minutes. I see no animals. What do? Well, you got to keep driving. So as we keep driving, we come to that fork in the road of uncertainty. Well, should we keep going? Or do we fall back into the give up stage, which is status quo? Don't worry about it, just keep going. You'll do fine. We'll see about it next time in the quarter that comes next. Make sense? But if you keep going and sharing information and communicating and listening to the railroad track, you're going to get the buy-in that you need. It takes time. It takes time when you're looking at evaluation, when you're trying to build performance. You're going to go through these stages because the ultimate goal is adopting the new culture or moving to that next phase. But you don't want to stay in the status quo, which is why we do performance evaluations and building high-performance teams. We want transformation. So what do we need to do to connect the dots? By facilitating effective strategies. Again, it's got to be a communication, two-way or three-way, depending on who's involved in it. So let's see what we have. Oh. Oh.
Oh.
Okay. All right. First tool. Again, I mentioned that this is a collaborative. You've got to be able to brainstorm expectations. When you're looking at performance and building peak performance, you as a leader, whether it's HR, whether it's a general manager, you need to be able to set some understanding and expectations of what does peak performance mean. Is the impact going to be in the blue box, high impact, but low difficulty? In other words, this is probably the best scenario for us. Is it going to be high impact with great difficulty, which means lots of time spent and probably lots of money invested? Are we looking at low impact, low difficulty? It depends. Are we looking at low impact, high difficulty? So you need to have some understanding of what that expectation is of whether it's the individual or whether it's the team that you're working with. Okay? This is going to help you frame your conversation. Oftentimes when we go in and we do performance evaluations or we're setting parameters and foundation for high performance teams, we haven't taken this time to brainstorm the expectation. So when we sit down with the teams, we have no idea where to start. This gives us the opportunity to where to start. When we start an improvement initiative in our Six Sigma projects, we do something similar to this, which helps us to understand where we start and what's important. And we want to know what's going to end up in that blue box, because we want high impact and low difficulty. So what can we start and then let it snowball into everything else so that we ultimately connect everything else? So this is a tool that is not rocket science, but it helps us understand where we begin with peak performance in our safari. And it helps, again, as the bottom bullet shows, summarizing priorities. have a toolbox. I'm not talking about what's in the garage. You got one. You got a toolbox, you got a toolbox. Everybody needs a toolbox. Everybody needs a toolbox. So let's see what you need in your toolbox as we move forward tonight. Okay. I'm going to have to read that to you because that is not. First thing you need is a P diagram. This is something we use in Six Sigma all the time. And the P diagram stands for parameters. So we shorten it and we call it P diagram. The first thing we need to know are what are the signals or the inputs. So as we're working with our talent management, we need to understand from our internal teams what kind of SMEs do we need to engage. Whether it's for a project, whether it's for our departments, what's that input going to be? What are those signal factors, as we call them? As we move them into the coaching for sustainable success, and it's got to be sustainable, otherwise what's the point? We want to, and I must apologize to you on that top one. The top one looks at noise factors. What's the noise? Do you know what I mean by what's the noise? What are the internal and external factors that are going to side rail my safari? It could be detractors. It could be people who are working their own agendas, don't understand the mission, fear factor, which means they're going to slow my process down, not derail it, they're going to slow it down. So what's the noise I have to deal with? The external political factors that impact my organization. If you work for a municipality, you are constantly dealing with political factors. Constituents who love to come and tell you how much taxes they pay and that they have every right to take up your whole day. Am I right? So that yellow box is dealing with the noise factors. So you've got to be able to calm the noise so that the animals aren't stirred unnecessarily. Here's the empowerment side, the controllable factors, the conditions. When we are working in building peak performance, we need to be able to understand what can we control. And we're looking at, first and foremost, what's the frequency of communication and how do we need to communicate with our teams, with the individuals, and do we possess a clear action plan? Again, that's going back to the brainstorming slide and that first tool I showed you. And don't be afraid to set a formal agenda and use flip charts. Because again, you've got everybody's head up, they're watching you. And then finally, looking at the response or the outcome and output. What is the end goal? And in the words of Stephen Covey, beginning with the end in mind. And this helps you go into those initial peak performance sessions each and every time, having your agenda ready. And what have I done? I've given you 4 blocks plus 1 in the middle. And they can be very, very powerful regardless of what you're doing. But if you're dealing with people, they're going to be looking for you as their leadership to guide them in helping to build the performance that you need to have. Okay? This is one of my favorite Six Sigma tools, and it's called the CTQ. And the CTQ stands for critical to quality. I use it in strategic planning, I use it in coaching, and I use it when I'm working with a team that needs to understand what's the end goal. And the way it works, as you can see here, when you're building a peak performance team, you've got to help them, again, to understand the desire. What's the objective? In this one, it just so happens this was an internal customer service initiative that we worked with a group. And what we did was, CTQ and need, we kind of reversed those because it looks better. But the CTQ is where we brainstormed. Remember the first tool? And we took everything that we had in that blue box and we set it in there with some additional brainstorming because we wanted to know what are the stakeholders needing. Again, we're looking at peak performance evaluation. It's a different kind of engagement. Once we did the master blend, we categorized them so that we're not looking at a whole bunch of different stuff. What are the main categories of need? Okay? Once we've done that, as you can see on the back end, we look at how do we measure our success. So we have collaboratively set the expectations of the team, of the individual. This works well when we've got to do corrective action and we need to set some goals and parameters. Remember the flip chart? You're in a corrective action session with someone. You're not just sitting with a check the box or a piece of paper that says this is what we need to do. Pull out this diagram. Let's talk about the reason why we're here. As far as performance evaluation, productivity improvement. What's the need? What are the detailed desires of this need? My expectations as a leader. And how are we going to measure your success? Because your success is my success. So what are we going to set? So we're setting a contract. It's collaborative. There's buy-in. Remember the road? This helps you when you get to that fork in the road. So you see how they're all intertwined. We get them beyond the fork in the road so that we can move into buy-in by using this tool. When you're working with teams, again, you're working with the collaboration that's needed. And it helps everybody to see themselves. So no one person is sitting there and it's no one person's plan, but everybody has input when it comes to this type of engagement. Okay? Comments? I either put you to sleep after lunch or I said something that sounded okay. Give me a nod. Okay, I got some nods, all right.
Blinks.
Conflict management. This is one that we find a lot of people avoid, and they become below the line managers in leadership, and that's where a lot of people get in trouble when they say, I've got to get rid of this person, or this team is just not performing, but I'm going to step back and I'm going to give them the opportunity to work it out, and maybe it'll just go away. It's my hope that it'll just go away, because I don't want to deal with it. That's major, 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 major problem. So one of the things, if we go to the next slide, let's look at a tool that we look at when we're dealing with resistance first. You got to work with it. You got to work with it. You got to view the team's or the members' resistance or avoidance as if they are looking at something to avoid the fear or the pain of moving into the unknown and uncharted waters, but it gives you the opportunity to delve deeper. You're not their friend, you're their manager. But in this instance, you're going to be more of a coach. And that's why I say, remember the Safari Guide, because that puts you into a different mental perspective. If you're sitting there as boss, you're going to be looking at different things. You can be a coach, but be that Safari Guide, because that means you're looking, you're scoping, you're on that excursion. Ask questions to uncover. In Six Sigma, we do the 5 whys, and we ask the why 5 times. And each time you ask it, there is a different answer to it, until you can't answer the question any further. Honor the issue because that's real for the people in conflict, or the teams in conflict. Look at the likelihood of worst scenarios, but stress the positive of the payoff for building solutions. When you've got an individual or team in conflict, you've got to get them working solutions. Otherwise, they never move forward. And guess what? People who never want to move forward, they look for company. They do. And before you realize it, your whole team is tanked. Gail mentioned that she was military, and so did my friend over here. When you're out on maneuvers, and you've got someone who's not totally committed in a team, she's shaking her head, yeah. Not a good time. Not a good time. So you've got to be able to work them on the solutions of the payoff. Let's see how we do that. Ooh. Note to self. Michelle. Wow. Gee. And it's not Halloween yet. Sorry, folks.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, something's going on, so we'll work it from here. Okay. Go with the flow. This is a tool that I call, that we designed when we were working with a group, and it's called the controllables. The controllables. The majority of the time when people are managing through a conflict or a perceived conflict, they're focused on things that they cannot control. And in the controllables chart, when you're managing team conflict, whether it's individual conflict, we pull this out. And there are 4 components to it. The first one is givens. Givens are going to be in your world whether the sun comes up and goes down and the moon comes up, whether it rains or not. It's going to be there. That's a given. People, places, or events that are always going to be in there. Can't do anything about them. It's the environment. Non-negotiables are put there by someone. People, places, or events that were put there. They are not negotiable. They will not move. Negotiables, you have a 50-50 chance of getting what you want out of it. People, places, and events that you can negotiate with to modify it, to manage the situations. And then we have the controllables, which are things that you are in direct control of. This is an empowerment tool. When we're managing peak performance teams, if you've got people who have never been in a team situation before, or they're being taken into an unknown, this helps them to understand, and this is one of the tools we use in the very beginning. Or if we're doing a coaching session and someone just cannot get off of an issue, the first thing I ask them is, can you control it? And if the answer is no, then I go to the givens. Is this a given? Is it going to be here regardless? And if the answer is yes, and I'm like, okay, well, let's go to the next one. And it gets to be a real short conversation after a point. And it's like if something's been going on for months, and we've had people in situations that have been going on for years, in a matter of 15 minutes, we got it resolved because we now have it in the box that tells us what we can and can't do. We usually end up in negotiables. How much of this can we negotiate? Well, we can negotiate driving through the jungle. We cannot negotiate the animals coming out. But if we hang out here long enough, we might see something. So we have a 50-50 chance of seeing something pop out of the woods. We can negotiate it. So we spend the rest of that time talking about what we can negotiate. If you're in a coaching session, a one-on-one, this is one of the first things that we pull out for peak performance. You can pull this out and say, let's talk about the negotiables. Let's talk about the controllables. Let's talk about the give-ins. We do this in sales. So this is a universal tool for you. Can we negotiate the decision somebody's going to make for us? No. Well, we can. Can we control it? No. So you know which box you got to work from. Make sense? Peak performance, focusing on those things that we can manage, negotiate, and control. Can you all see this? You can. Yeah. I don't know what happened. Yeah. I am sorry. I don't know what happened. Okay, I'm almost done, so I'll try to explain for you technology. Okay, with coaching your teams, you have shining stars, you've got middle of the road stars, middle of the galaxy stars, and then you've got falling stars. We have some of those in our organization. Well, everybody's a star. Some shine brighter than others, but we want everybody to feel like a star. Okay? So there are different things that you need to do to motivate the different levels and tiers of stars. For you, Mary. Your bright stars want to get involved. They're probably going to be your team leaders. Give them the training that's going to keep them motivated. Promote them. Acknowledge them. When you get to your middle stars, make sure they're paired with a bright star. It's called emulate. Where do I want to be? I want to be a bright star. So give them, they're going to need more goal setting than that shining star who's going to be self-motivated. And then you've got to be sure that if you've got a falling star, that you really pay attention to that person on that team, because they can kill your team. They can kill the morale. It may be someone who you brought in to put them with a group of more motivated people in hopes that they'll catch on. It could be that this person really needs to learn how to be more of a team player. You've got to be able to give them the feedback, help them set their goals. If you continue issues with a falling star, then you do need to make HR your best friend. And I know I'm preaching to the choir in this group. But these are, again, some helpful tips and hints when you're talking about working with performance teams. Most of them are self-directed. But there are times when you, as that safari guide, are going to have to step in. So you need to be sure that you have some tidbits of knowledge of what to do in order to redirect and manage that conversation. Okay, let's move. Who is in your jungle? Managing diverse team cultures does not necessarily mean ethnicity. Okay, it doesn't. It doesn't. So let me further explain who's in this jungle I'm talking about. Let's move forward. When we're talking about building peak performance teams and individuals, these are the cast of characters that are in your jungle. Have you ever sat in a meeting And there's always someone who says, before we adjourn, just one more thing. Or, I was thinking the other day, and you know, the wallpaper, I think we need to make it chartreuse. Aqua is just not working for me. Or you've got someone that says, okay, I think we decided on that, let's move forward. We already said we're going to do it, let's move forward. Those are the characters. You've got your executors. Don't care about the details. We agreed upon it, let's move. You've got your refiners. They're your analyzers. They analyze the color of the tablecloth, the quality of it. Where do we get it? Are they good enough? We need 5 bids versus 3. So they're going to look at every single detail. They're your quality assurance people. We've got our creators. They're the ones that like the wallpaper. They like to meet and greet. They're your social bugs. We've got our advancers, who are your spokespeople. They love to talk. And then we have our prospectors, who are always looking at the different alternatives. They're very goal-oriented. So they have a little bit of all of them, but then we have the facilitator who is multilingual and speaks everybody's language. And they're the people that you need in your peak performance teams. If you don't have them, I'll show you in just a moment what that looks like and how it offsets. If you're missing any one of these types of characters, then you really do have slowed progress. And I'll give you an example. Several years ago, we worked with an organization called Mercedes-Benz, a little car company. And we were doing diversity training and civil treatment training for them because they were having problems. And they initially brought us in because they said, well, the black people don't get along with the white people, and the northern people don't get along with the southern people. And we were like, okay, all right, we'll work it. And we realized that that wasn't the case at all. What was the problem was they had, it's a manufacturing company. You've got engineers, you've got technical people. And suddenly, they've got recruiters who decided, we're going to hire creative people. We're going to hire prospectors. But they're still outnumbered by the refiners, or these technical people, who were eating up alive my creative people. So their jungle was on fire. They had the brush fires like they've got out in California. Everything was burning up. So one of the things, and one of the things that they did not understand was that it was not a gender issue. It was not a racial issue. It was a mental process issue. Because they had people now who had to work together who processed differently. And they were asked to get to the finish line at the same time. That was not a happy place. So as leaders, as HR leaders, learning these characters, you're going to start picking up in meetings the cast that starts to come out of the brush in the jungle. Just by default, when you think about the definition and description of these kinds of people. The main tool that we use when we're building and learning how to be better leaders in HR, in general management, is this whole stop, look, and listen. And we added another one called ask. You first have to stop and understand what the situation is, as we've shared some of these tools with you. Looking at the ask, what am I really, really dealing with? What am I hearing? Looking at the environment that we've got people in. And then finally, the listen. Remember I said in the very beginning, we've got to listen. Because that whole performance conversation is going to be dependent upon it. And that gets into the lessons learned. One of the things that we have to do when we're dealing with high-performance teams, or we're building capacity in individuals, we've got to be able to reflect on the lessons learned and look at the measurements of success that we set in the CPQ. So let's see what that really looks like. I was in a art committee workshop today, all day. And one of the things I asked our HR director was, when was the last time we did an employee satisfaction survey? We need to understand where our teams are. We need to understand what we need to do to help performance, not just the processes that they know and understand and live every day. And she said, well, we don't do that. What? Why? Here I go with my 5 whys again. She said, oh, we don't do the employee satisfaction survey. I'm like, but that's a big no-no. And she said, oh, but we do small cluster focus groups so that we can find out what we need to know and what our employees think and share them updates. I said, but maybe I'm confused. That's an employee satisfaction conversation. You're taking a verbal survey. You're taking a live survey. You're building the transparency and trust that we need to have. And that's exactly what we need to do when we're doing these lessons learned. If you've never done it in an organization, it's not as painful as it seems. But the peak performance, the high productivity, the greater retention comes when our workforce, when individuals who may be marginal, did I get that right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Understand that 1, we do care, 2, we are sincere, and 3, please expect these conversations because we want reciprocal feedback. We want the conversation, we want the dialogue. So we're looking for the opportunities to grow and sustain our success. I always tell managers, be careful what you ask for. You wanted the title, you got it. Now what? It's not as pretty as you might think. We see a lot of managers who grew up on the line with their buddies, and then they're expecting their buddies to toe the line and increase their peak performance. It ain't happening. That's a technical term. It's not. And that's when people get real smart on the labor laws and the EEO processes. Performance goes down. I coached a guy several years ago who worked with a tree company. He was on the crew. He was a star. He got promoted, and suddenly he became a falling star. Okay, so he went from one end of the category to the next. He had never been trained on the different aspects of what it takes to be a leader. But he saw the money, he got the title, and he got the EEO complaint on the wrong side of the EEO complaint. He said, I had no idea that there were laws that go with this job. Yes. And he couldn't understand why his buddies would suddenly not perform for him. He had not made the transition. So lessons learned, feedback is what we need to be sure that we do and understand that it can't be just once a year. It may be once a month, maybe every other month, but peak performance-driven organizations have a consistent and frequent communication table that they use to take their teams on safari. They go on frequent safaris. And this is the final one that we use. This is your gauge to see, are we shifting in the right direction? Are the methods that we're using easy or difficult from 1 to 5? Are we moving in the right direction? Is there a different deployment that we need to take that fits our culture to keep the performance moving forward to that peak level plateau that we need so that we can go to the next plateau, because it never ends? And then the development, is there something that we need to develop when it comes to the culture specifically tailored to our organization? This is something that is one of my favorites because it brings a nice closure when you've got to sit with your division heads and talk about the shift and the progress. Are we really making progress? And that's what it's all about when we're trying to look at building peak performance. This tool comes from Journey to the Emerald City, which is a series of books by John Connor and his partner, Roger Connor and Tom Smith. They also wrote the Oz Principle, which I love, because that looks at alignment. A peak performance team, a peak performance individual has an alignment with the company. They have defined goals, and they're consistently reviewing it and communicating it with their internal partners to make sure that there is sustainable success on all sides. Finally, I want to leave you with one last item. Happiness is the bottom line. And it's my hope that with some of these tools that I've shared with you this evening, that you all will come into that 14% who now have a performance management system that is ideal for your culture, that works for you as HR managers and professionals and general managers, because it is not always about the money. And at this time, I'll take some aha queries. Those are questions in our culture. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am. I was like, don't let me stand here all this time.
So you have a team that has quite a lot of marginal and rising stars, I think it was, right? But you do have the falling stars in that team. How do you suggest that you not allow your middle stars to become like the falling star because of the influence of the falling star with those middle stars?
Good question. You have no shining stars?
You may have a couple, like a lot more, let's say, middle stars, and you definitely have some falling stars.
I would start with the big
Use
group.
your language, Gail.
I would start with that middle group first. And once I have set some expectations in terms of where the organization is going, because you now represent the organization. And there are certain expectations and goals as to where you're going. So you've got to go into that session understanding that. When you sit with them, you want to understand what their drive is and where they see themselves helping the organization to go based on that vision that you set with them. So what you're doing is giving them an update on the, you always have the State of the Union, the state of the YWCA, as it relates to your particular branch. And this is where we're going, but we need you all to give us some feedback as far as how you can contribute to moving us in that direction, because we can't do it alone. And that's a key statement. We can't do it without you. So you're giving them value at that point and ownership. You're asking for them to help you take some ownership. That's what I would, and then start the conversation, and based on what feedback you get, because they're going to start where they are. And then you're going to need to start moving them baby steps forward in terms of how do you see us getting there? What do you need? There may be a need for training. I need to build my capacity. So you're going to start looking at how do I get them? Because again, now you're taking them into an unknown. You want to take them out of the status quo. And you may invite your shining stars to that meeting because they're going to come with the ideas. They're going to be the self-starters. This is their opportunity. And you're giving them assignments because they're going to hear and be your scribes. And they're going to say, oh, we need to do that. So you want to mix that group, but make it the middle stars session. But let the shining stars feed and then ask for volunteers for help. And again, that goes back to pairing those middle stars with a shining star. Did I answer?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of referring to a very small, like, you know, because we have so many different divisions to a very small group. But the difficulty with that small group, as I described it, is that the falling star is the leader of that team. So it makes it tricky to work on the middle stars.
That for me would be a one-on-one conversation. Very careful one-on-one conversation, again, scripted with this is where we're going in the organization, the vision and the mission. You got to be real careful when you're talking to a falling star. They get real smart, real quick, and it can backfire. This is our mission. This is our vision. So you're coming from a scripted perspective, and I want to see, where do you see yourself fitting in this, and what do I need to help you? Don't let them know they're a falling star, because they believe that they're the shining star, okay? How can I help you continue being that star in the organization for us to move it forward? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're not lying, but you've got to go in scripted. When you deviate from script, that's when you get in trouble.
My only comment on that is don't call them a star if they actually are a falling star, because that'll be turned against you at some point. And my only comment
Use the name.
no, you'd be surprised if they come back with what they focus on.
Yeah, but they said I was a star.
Yeah, they told me I was a star, and 2 weeks later I was fired. I can see it in their court polling now.
Yeah.
The one thing I see, and why a lot of employers that I deal with, because I do a lot of counseling too, but the litigation and the EEOC charges I see, invariably it was, if it's a performance issue, it was someone who was held on too long. And sometimes you just have to cut the cord with someone, particularly if they're creating dissension in the department.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is, and I had an employer that had this, they had an supervisor who was causing chaos. And they let him run rampant for 1.5 years, 4 EEOC charges out of that department.
Yes, yeah. And that's
A department of 10 people.
yes. And that's something, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Because I've done some coaching sessions where people have been left to run rampant. And basically the coaching was done to protect the company. And we always set the measurement for success and hand it back off to the HR director and say, now you've got your roadmap set, it's been agreed upon, and now you've got to track progress, and now you've got to work whatever the next step, whether it's separation or whether it's bringing back to normalcy, but you now have the documentation for sustainable success. And we always do find out that their performance appraisals were stellar. You know, and you've got to, and that's why I use the tool. Tell me what the needs, wants, and desires are, and how we're going to measure our success. And then let's set a time frame to come back and see whether we are realistic in these measurements that we set up. You had your hand up.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback on that. So I totally understand that. Let's talk to the stars, the middle performers, whatever word you want to use. They're good employees. They're good. They're good. They're really good employees. You know, they don't cause you any problems. They work not just quite above the radar, but they're good
they don't want to do. But you have got to look at what the performance metrics are. And you may have to shift people. You gotta be careful with that. but you have got to have clearly defined goals and action plans, whether it's for groups or whether it's for individuals. And you've got to be consistent in how you monitor and measure that.
When you look at a satisfaction survey or an employee engagement survey, and you say about what's important, and your scores aren't so great compared to what they really could be, and your team says, I'm good. What do you as the manager do at that point? Because you have none. You have aspirations, hopes, you'd like them to succeed, and do you just start this whole process and say, okay, we're done?
No.
Right, so
No.
tell me
No.
what is...
If I've got some goals that I'm accountable for,
It's not about goals. So when you talk about engagement or satisfaction, about what makes people happy in the workplace,
those become my goals. If I'm a manager, or I'm an HR director, but more specifically, if my people are telling me that there are certain things and levels of happiness that they have, then my goals then, and the question that I ask my people is, what do we need to get you to the level of full happiness? If you need to be at a 10 and you're only at a 5, what do we need to get you there? And you've got to set that strategy and have that conversation with those, whether it's the team or whether it's an individual, to get them there. And that's what goes back to that measurement by success. What are our success metrics? Help me understand that, because right now you're telling me that there's a need that I need to pay attention to. And I think that's one of the things that doesn't happen. No.
I'll go off on you.
Okay. We can have a sidebar afterwards, but you've got to fully understand what that need is. If you don't understand what that need is...
No, the needs are understood. I'll go off mine. I don't want to waste
Okay. Anybody else?
Just your piece on performance reviews was really timely. My company just got done.
I'm sorry, my what?
My company just got done performance reviews.
Oh, okay.
It's a miserable process.
It is.
Forever.
It is.
And so I've been trying to influence us to do away with it. So I thought your information was really timely. I was just wondering, do you find that it's the business that drives the actual need to do a performance review, or do you believe it's HR that's sort of legacy around the fact that you do the same process every year? Just wondering, like, who you think actually drives the fact that we just keep doing this over and over again.
I think it's one, the legal requirement, because you're doing it, but it's, people need to know where they stand, okay? Bottom line, it's a best practice. I had a client we worked with a couple years ago. We had to literally go in. It was a $50 million company with no HR department. No HR department. There were people who had been there 25 years and never, ever had a performance appraisal. Never, ever had gotten a raise. Most of the people, if not all of them, were immigrants. And they were grateful for the opportunity to work in a company on U.S. soil. And my comment to the owners was, it only takes one person to get educated. They had no job descriptions. They had nothing. When we finished, and then we had 68-year-old men working in the warehouse. And they had a high workman's comp claim. And people were getting injured and not staying out, getting fully healed and coming back into the warehouse, lifting. 68-year-old man was the average age in the warehouse. And no OSHA guidelines. It was kind of scary. So when we finished with them, they were educated on the fact that there are U.S. laws laws that you have got to adhere to. There are OSHA guidelines that you have to follow. There are certain standards. And my comment to him was, the only person who really understood that was his COO. And I said to the owner, what if this man leaves? Which he did 6 months later. It's going to all go back to normal. So it's a best practice, and it keeps you out of trouble. Bottom line, it keeps you out of trouble. If you're in business to be profitable, to be sustainable, you have got to understand that you've got to have a feel for what your people need to continue making you look good. As a manager, if you don't understand that, you're not going to be a manager long. You're not going to be successful very long. No? You won't. You won't. These are things that you must do. And it doesn't have to be painful. Ladies and gentlemen, is there anyone who has any other question for me? Thank you very much. Sorry about the PowerPoint. Oh, thank you.
Guys, we have a door prize too from our sponsor, Keynote. You have not